Now,
Welcome everyone, it's 7th. We are starting with Evolution of Consciousness Integral Perspective today. My name is Deepak and I'm a philosopher. We still exist. And we are running this session on consciousness studies together with James, Kasha, Simone. James is here, Kasha is also here. And today is the fourth session on the topic. So it's every Tuesday we're having. Last Tuesday we worked on evolution of consciousness from an Eastern perspective, how consciousness has evolved. Having said that, some of these ideas and theories, which might seem like out of the way when we're talking about Eastern perspective, has also been used by a lot of Western philosophers and got into something called an integral theory or integral perspectives. It's a very well-known perspective these days. It's being used by many philosophers. There's a lot of new organization models are being developed based on this theory. In fact, in Switzerland, they're also starting a party, a political party, based on the same theory called Integral Party. I think there's there. One of my friends was a member of it, and then he had a long COVID, so he got out. And there's also on the YouTube and everything. So a lot of work is being done in this topic there. So this goes much deeper in the society when we're talking about a lot of systemic change projects which are coming are also planning to use or also using these models. Before we go into more details about all the concepts, because it's going to be a little bit mental session. It's because there's a lot of information today, especially when we are going more towards the Western philosophy part of it. Maybe we just take 1 minute silent meditation, right? Just arrive in this place, and maybe I can guide you if you don't mind. Feel comfortable in your body, in the space. You can keep your eyes open or closed. If it's open, please just lower the gaze. A lot has happened today. Your mind was very busy. Your heart was very busy. A lot of thoughts might have passed through. If you can say thank you to them for being present with you on this day. Now you are here in Zurich at MQ Academy. Getting inspired by the thought processes of various philosophers, thinkers. Allow yourself this wisdom. And whenever you're ready at your own pace, you can come back to this space and time. And slowly open your eyes if it's closed. So how much difference 1 minute can make? So, evolution of consciousness, integral perspective. Just checking, how many of you have heard about integral theory or know something about that? Okay. So that's what we are going to work on it today. Agenda, we'll work on two. For me, there are many theorists who work on this this integral perspective, but two of them we are going to take today, because for me these two are important: Jean Gebser and Ken Wilber. There are others who also created their own models of evolution of consciousness from Western philosophy perspective, like Piaget and Suzuki. However, I personally think these two models complement quite a lot, which we can discuss today. So, evolution of consciousness from Jean Gebser's perspective, evolution of consciousness from Ken Wilber's perspective, and Ken Wilber talk about two things: levels and quadrants. So we'll be talking about that. And then, what is integral consciousness we are talking about. That be okay? So let's start with evolution of consciousness from Jean Gebser perspective. Listen, who is Jean Gebser? Jean Gebser was born in 1905 to 1973. He's a Swiss philosopher, linguist, and the poet who described the structures of consciousness. Now, being poet is a very important part of his life, because if you look into their writings, they are very poetic, almost like mythopoetic we talked about. And it's very beautifully written documents, books, what he has written. And that was part of his being. He was hanging out with a lot of poets. He was born in Prussia, current-day Poland, and he has a very moving external life. He moved to Spain, then he has his poetic awakening experience in Malaga, in one of the castles, and he really wrote about poetically about that castisha. Then he moved to Paris, France, and then south of France, and then it was occupied. Then France got occupied by Germany, and then he left Germany and come to Switzerland just 2 hours before the borders crossed. And also, I forgot that from Spain to France was also, he was kicked out, or he left because at that time the dictatorship had started. So he was going through a lot of turmoil in his life there. But finally he makes Switzerland as his home. He was deeply inspired by Rainer Maria Rilke. He put anybody knows, about Rilke and his poetry. And he thought that Rilke, through his poetry, has given all the levels of consciousness which we can get. So he was so deeply, and that was the part of his poetic structure. And he was friends with Carl Gustav Jung. He was hanging out in Zurich with Jung, who was a Swiss psychologist and psychiatrist. And he was also very inspired by Eastern traditions. He traveled quite a lot in India and Far East, and he has friends from Lamas and Tibetan tradition as part of his inner circle. So his wisdom is quite a lot based on also Eastern traditions, or it's been shaped by that. He wrote his magnum opus Ursprung und Gegenwart in 1949 to 1952, and it was later translated into the ever-present origin. It's beautiful, one of the amazing book. Because also when he was writing in a more poetic style, philosophy in a poetic style. It's difficult to read, but not difficult for our mental structures, but difficult because it's also poetic in nature. Yeah. But for the soul, it's a beautiful read with a lot of wonderful concepts. Yeah. So one of the few philosophers who have crossed those boundaries between poetic and philosophy. And he became an inspiration for the next generation of philosophers. And Ken Wilber, whose work we'll be talking about, he was very much inspired by Jean Gebser and other William Evan Thompson and others. And right now, in the latest philosophical circles, Jean Gebser is making a huge comeback because people again and again started seeing what he was he was bringing to the world at that point. Welcome. So just we were saying we're talking about the integral consciousness, evolution of consciousness from integral perspective, and we'll be discussing the work of Jean Gebser and Ken Wilber, and we just started with the introduction of Jean Gebser. Yeah? Any questions? Now, his work, sorry, I'm trying this first time. Okay. The ever-present origin. It's almost like, he said that something called origin is always present. For him, the origin is like a universal consciousness, which is there. It's almost like Sri Aurobindo's involution in Sri Aurobindo, it was that consciousness had arrived in the world. He didn't use the word involution, but he said it was always there. And it consists of everything what needs to be there. And slowly, the levels of consciousness are emerging out of that origin. And that's why I said this origin is always there and it's coming. That's why the book Ever-Present Origin. There's an original source of timeless wisdom and awareness. And human consciousness is returning back to its source. So it's coming into different shapes, modes and shapes, and then going back to that source. And the third important point is this original source is ever present in our consciousness. We all have it, we can tap into that. And that's why Gebser called it ever-present origin. Thoughts? So here we are having a philosopher who really put a very strong proposition. We can also call it a hypothesis, which he has put, that there's a source, there's a beginning. So from a Western scientific perspective, the big bang which has happened. It could be anything else. But in that big bang, or even before, for Gebser, there's all information which is stored. And slowly we are decoding it. And when we are decoding it, we are getting those information. It's not like, oh, one person is doing it. We are moving into the human evolution is a process of decoding it. Even through all the chaos and all the rebel and even the violence which has gone through. It is part of the process of where we are moving towards. And that's what he said. There's 4 levels around that. And we are moving towards 5th. The first level, he said, is archaic level. All the pictures are from Dali. So, okay, it's ChatGPT. He wrote archaic, it's very beautiful, the source from which all springs. But it is that which springs forth itself. So archaic means origin or the source, the first. There. But here there's 0 dimensionality in the space and time. But there is a concept, even 0 is a dimensionality which is getting present. There's ever-present origin, but there was some movement which has happened. A spring which has set forth. It's not individual, but we are truly identical with the world. Because, I don't know, Christianity is the pure Adam and Eve together before eating the apple. It's like pure consciousness, but it has something coming out of that. Let me go to all the 4 and then we'll have a discussion. The other level is that it becomes a magical. Magical, the word magos, it's also like making. So we go forth 1 level. And here say each and everything intertwines and is interchangeable. So everything is connected to everything else. And there's a new 1 dimension start emerging of space. Now, this type of consciousness is part of these tribal groups there. And if you look into the children, they also have in the early stages this level of consciousness, where they know something, but they don't know, but everything is connected. Sometimes you might have to say when you're in the trams and the children start looking, but for them, when they're looking outside and looking at you, you're not an individual. You're someone they can put they can have an eye-to-eye connection. And that's all. For them, everyone is same in that. So there's of course, apart from their parents or people they know, so there's some dimensionality which has come through. In my perspective, a lot of, when we talk about shamanic traditions, also coming from African shamanism, which I know a little bit more, and also the Latin American shamanism, this is pure magical realms they take us to. That level of consciousness. So magic is something is connected, but something is emerging, but we are still in an enchanted universe where everything is interconnected and we are moving through that universe. And then we move to mythical. Now it's started getting more denser. Now what happens in the mythical is objects and persons start getting woven together in stories. We start emerging in different stories. And this concept of polarity, this concept of duality, this concept of paradoxes start emerging in that level of consciousness. So mythic is also coming from mythos, and there's a similar word for silence and speech. So here, where the silence is silence and the speech is speech, where the speech is silence and silence is speech, there, when the paradoxes are present, we can talk around those paradoxes and we can still be silent and feel those paradoxes. So new level of dimensionality start emerging. There are a lot of gods, a lot of stories, but some stories might not even have, they might have a message, but it's okay, so what? We might not be able to get that so what. But the so what is deeply encoded in those stories. In Indian cultures, for me, it's a very mythical culture, at least right now. We have these Ramayana and Mahabharata, these epics, and I've read those or watched them multiple times, and every time when I watch it, I feel some part of my life is being reflected in those stories, and I get some message for even these times. So archetypally, things are getting connected with this mythical level of consciousness. And the last one is the fourth. In the two-dimensionality, here, the beginning of self-awareness, and that it becomes cyclical. We say in Indian systems, it's a cyclical system. The time are cyclical, and there are different yugas. So we see time as cyclical. Here in the mental structure, we start going into the realm of conceptualization, formal logic, and the capacity to create systems. Where our mind start becoming much more active. That's the next level of consciousness which we move towards. It's three-dimensional, and the time started becoming linear in that case. So it's one after another. We can start putting the things there. So the time becomes structured. So that's where the biggest change happens in this level of consciousness. And now here it's very important to notice, he talked about there's deficient and efficient versions of each consciousness, and especially in the mental realm. He said the deficient version is a rationality. He called it rationality as a deficient version of it, where we just so much focus on everything, we reduce everything to their own separation, and we forget to see any interconnection. it was very much required. We were able to look at the atom as an atom, and we were able to go inside the atom and even split the atom, and that was a beauty of human mind, that we were able to do that. However, we never able to connect it back to everything which is there, and that was a deficiency in the system. And he said how we can go back to the efficient system in the mental realm is through the work of values, ethics, because deficient system is independent. Deficient mental is independent of values and ethics. It's about, we want to do it, we just do it. It's beautiful. Let's try to go for it. It's a problem. We just need to solve it. And here is also there's a separation between me and other come. When we talk about Descartes, I think therefore I am. There's also, I think I am. There's a separation between mind and the matter, which happened very strongly in that realm. So now when we talk around this, these four levels, they are all present in different shapes and forms. We can call it, we evolve from one level to another. There. We can also say that some countries are much more in one level than other level. Today I was having a discussion with a researcher, and we were discussing something about the work, and then she said, I went to India, and but before going to India, I read some stories, mythology, and that really helped me in learning about India. And my first response was, yeah, in India we still have this mythical consciousness, which is still very present there. Anybody you just meet on the streets will tell you a story about Shiva and Krishna and then Devi, and say, oh, you're acting like Kali. So it's just so much part of our normal day-to-day culture, part of it. Wherever, if you go to this Latin America, like I lived for 3 years in Latin America or Africa, it's really about pure magic which has happened through plant consciousness, through plant medicines, where we really connect to different realms of magic, and we can feel it in our body. And with that lady we were talking about, and then say, oh, how about Switzerland? I said, yeah, Switzerland is more structured. So we are more in that mental realm, and that's where we operate, and that's where we also did something good. We have some of the best universities here, EPFL, ETH, University of Zurich, St. Gallen. So we have created something beautiful out of that mentor. So what Jean Gebser was saying is, each level, they are not independent levels. When it happened, each level, and that's a word we use, that's a line we use quite a lot in any philosophical system, includes and transcends. So when the magical consciousness came, when we got a little bit separated in our consciousness and seeing things still interconnected but different, we were not in the archaic consciousness. When the mythical consciousness came, it includes and transcended archaic and magical. So they were both present, and we look into a different lens. We try to go into next level of decoding, into structures, new level of dimensionality which we have put with the stories and the people, a little bit of othering which has happened when we put things as stories in the concept, and start introducing time as a cyclical. And in the mental structure we went even one step ahead. We include everything. I think that's what he's talking about. In the efficient versions, we include everything and transcend that. But in the deficient version, we only focus on it. And sometimes both are required. In deficient version, if we would not have focus, we would not be able to split the atom, and probably now able to fuse it for one of the green energy sources things. We need that reductionist. But if it becomes the only thing, then become a problem, because it is not the only thing. There's an efficient version of it with the values, and there's everything behind once I was doing a meditation like almost 6-7 years ago, and actually then I really realized this level of consciousness, what is there. If I can share my meditation, what I saw in that. So in the meditation, I was I was in a beach. I started like on a beach, just reading a book, and it's like, okay, something is wrong. Everything was good, but I was not happy. There, I was missing something. And then in the meditation, when I like in the first step of meditation, and then I moved deeper. And in the first level, I went where I become the first human just walking in the, around the trees. And I really felt this level of somewhere in between archaic and magical level of consciousness. Everything was there, but I didn't know anything. There was no mind, but everything was me, but there was still a separation. In the second level, I think it was between magical and mythical, I just jumped into the water, came out of the water, and then I saw a king going on a procession. And I just went completely naked in the front of the king, and they gave me the clothes, and then they took me to the king's courtyard, and then we started having discussion. So for me, it was more like stories. We're talking more about the mythical level. And in the third level, actually, I went back to my on the beach again, but completely as a different person. And then I can see everything, and still finding meaning in whatever I was doing, even just reading the book and together with my friends. So I still have it's almost 7 years ago, I still have very vivid memories of that. And then I really, at least embodiedly, understood these levels of consciousness. This is the first time I shared this story. Any thoughts before we move to where we are going?
I just have like a small kind of...
Please, thoughts, concerns, questions, comments.
I always have a little bit of a problem with this like level. I mean, just the vocabulary, the levels, right? And like sometimes the way it's taught, it has some kind of like dimension of the time or the timeline that, there's archaic, and then it's a level consciousness, and the higher level and the higher level. Whereas for me, the way I understand it, it all happens in a way at the same time, right? Yeah. It's a kind of like self-feeding. Yeah. So it's at that's how I understand dimensionality. And I'm just thinking if he has some similar idea also, that it's archaic. It doesn't mean that it's the lowest or the earliest, and then there's the mental, but it's kind of like mental and archaic happening at the same time and just feeding each other.
Yeah. So both are true. Thank you very much for bringing that concern, and that's one of the biggest concern of the entire evolution of consciousness theory. I'll take it even more detailed when I come to Ken Wilber, because he was deeply criticized. He is still deeply criticized for that. So let's hold on a little bit, that thought. Other thing which I would say from my perspective is I think both are required. When we put these levels, we are really operating in the mental realm of the things. And we are separating it, we are reducing it. At the moment we start talking about it, we are reducing the dimensionalities of it. So it's important, it has an efficient version, which is we are able to understand and separate things for the sake of understanding. And it also has a deficient version around that we take it as the only truth. And then it feels like we are going somewhere. Being enough here and now is not enough.
I think it has more implications. I mean, there are also cultural implications,
Yeah, and those implications we are going to talk around that.
Colonialism, etc. Colonialism, etc. I mean, that's...
Means for me, the colonialism, let's say there's few... we can put the things there. We talk about some of the deeper implications because Ken Wilber is highly criticized for that. Even my mentor had a very big public debate, a public fight with, not debate, blog fight with Ken Wilber around that, on the same topic, because it's also very masculine in nature. It's like one after another, and we're just going somewhere. And sometimes with the feminine perspective is everything is just happening at the same time, right here, right now. And both of them are very masculine thinkers. And that's one of the biggest criticism for them. And also both of them are white, masculine thinker, which is made about the Western world perspective there, which includes that they are more looking at things from a mental perspective. So, considering this, I would still say they are wonderful thinkers. Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions? Sorry, on the colonization, I think, that was for me the complete deficient of mentor, which has happened, because I lived that, I didn't grow up in a colonized world, but my grandfather did. So, and I heard the stories from them, and my grandmothers too. And our culture was still very mythical. It still is, and it was mythical. But then what happened was purely mental realm. When we come into reductionist perspective, it has such speed and strength and the focus that overtook everything. And that's where it becomes purely deficient. At some point we have scientific revolution, but it was fueled by colonization and slavery. And the same thing happened with the indigenous people getting killed with the magical. They were like, oh, some magic is going to happen, but then there was guns. And the guns were so much more powerful at that point than the magic. But that realm was getting operated. And the point which we are talking here, and that's for me the beauty of both of them, they're saying is, we are not going back. We have to include and transcend. One thing as compared to
I was arguing.
Yeah. He's saying we are not going back in a sense that both are wrong. If we are saying if we only criticize the mental structure and develop a complete romantic image that let's go to the magical world, or let's only live in that world, that we are going back into old level of consciousness, which might not be relevant for the current times, because things have moved on as a human evolution. So we need to include everything. I'll come back to you once again, just I want to make a point for the next one. We are moving forwards towards integral consciousness. Then integration is about the inclusion and transcendence of all previous structures without discarding them. We are not discarding any one of this, but we are not also romanticizing one. Because I also have a lot of discussions with the people. It's like, oh, forget the mind. At some point, yes, we do need that forgetting of mind to come into that embodied experience, but we also need to come back with the mind. In the integral consciousness, there's a time freedom, which is a very, very, very important concept. Time freedom, we are saying that time is not cyclical or linear, and it's both. But it's a perspective. So that's the word he created. He said that in the first three levels, archaic, magical, and mythical, there was unperspective, because there was no perspective of the mind which has come through. So that was unperspectival. In the mental realm, it became perspectival world. And if we are going to integral consciousness, a perspectival, there's no perspective. Both perspective and unperspective are part of it and synthesized together. So there's a freedom from really understanding, trying to understand the perspective. That's when we know things. And I love this sentence which he uses. We live with the aliveness of the past and the presence of the future. So he's also saying he's not only here and now, which is important, but that here and now contains that we know about the history, about the past, and we can also sense what future is coming. And that's why this discussion of colonization, this discussion of slavery are very important. These traumas which people at individual level go through, because without acknowledging that, we cannot, it's not here and now, we cannot do that completely. So, and that's why it's a little bit, for me, it's also beyond, and both Jean Gebser and Ken Wilber, they're also a bit critique of an Indian culture and also the Eastern culture, which I also agree with them. Because at some point, these cultures become here and now and transcending, which become a spiritual bypass in some cases. It's important, but also acknowledging the past. And that's where Carl Jung said, you don't get enlightened only by being, but also only by looking into your light, but by looking at your shadows. So a lot of shadow work is missing in a lot of Eastern cultures. So he's saying, do that, and also seeing what type of world we want to create. Just sense that world. There's an interconnectedness of everything. The world is not even seen as dual, but interconnected. And he wrote this line, whose inner truth and deeper dimensions are made visible through integral consciousness. When we have this integral consciousness, we know it will be integrated. Everything is interconnected. Of course, one level we have with COVID, when we know that if someone in your friend circle sneezes, 3 levels down, a person cannot go to the office. Here it was really came in front of our eyes, but the world is so much interconnected, everything is moving. But just knowing it in the deeper levels of your own truth, that's the integral next level of consciousness. And other thing, last thing on this is there's origin which is present. Ever-present origin. And for me, it's like really everything is, I see it, everything is just folded together. I'm just making my own diagram here. So for me, there's an ever-present origin where everything is folded. And out of that, in spirals, things are coming through. It's a new level of consciousness. Let's first Kasha and then James. You had, sorry, I moved on. James.
So, is this kind of just happening? Is it kind of evolution, or did he sort of say how you can cultivate this, or is there practices to like sort of enhance these things, or do we just wait and it kind of evolves towards that level?
I think it's a great question. I think it's, for me, for my understanding of what I know about him, it's really going into all the levels of consciousness and integrating it, which is, if we combine with our levels of archaic consciousness, going to those states, combine the level of magical, mythical, efficient mental, then these levels will evolve. So it's the growth which will happen. He doesn't, in my perspective, I don't know, he gave a technique to do that, which is very different than Sri Aurobindo, who did that. He said, oh, there's a supermind, it's the same integral consciousness supermind of Sri Aurobindo. He said, how can we do that, go to supermind? You have to do this integral yoga. And integral yoga, how do you do that? There are 3 to 4 step process. You have to go through that. And for each process you have to go through. So Sri Aurobindo gave a complete map on it. He was still, in my understanding, at the poetic level of what's emerging how by just being in those states we can find those structures. More philosophical perspective. However, I would say if you read this ever-present origin, this book itself is such beautifully written that you totally sense that level of integral consciousness through the words he has put together. L'acto divino, it's like you go to the divine by reading, in the old monastic style. Partial answering. Any other questions? So this was a work of Jean Gebser. He actually he died in 1970s. The book was a very big hit there in late 60s. So the moment he was started getting recognized for his work in 1970s, he had a health problem and he died, which is a little bit of there. And then in its, I think, eulogy they written a person who died with a very soft smile on his face. So he died, but his work continued and picked up by Ken Wilber and some other theorists. So let's look at them. So evolution of consciousness from Ken Wilber's perspective, and we are going to discuss levels of consciousness and quadrants. Anybody heard about Ken Wilber? Yeah? What do you know about him?
I mean, I know his theory. I studied his integral theory, and I was interested in sort of him as a person. He's quite a colorful person. Recently, I was just like a little bit looking at YouTube, what's going on with him. He has now, he kind of like transcended his masculinity into more, he's wearing a wig and kind of dress up a little bit more queer.
Ah, okay, I haven't seen that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of like, also like gossips and rumors, like what's going on with him, is he getting crazy?
He talks also alive.
He is, yeah.
Yeah, he's still alive.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, he's...
So 1949 in current.
He's an old man.
Yeah. He's one of the, I would say, very, very contemporary, very beautiful, and a very relevant thinker. If you're having a great mind, colorful personality, which means he's also heavily criticized and critiqued for a lot of things. And as most of the critique, he's also just take it very strongly and come back, which also sometimes doesn't go in his favor. But he's also true to himself in that way. When he had a point, he says that point.
Oh, he lost his wife to cancer. I think that's why I thought he had died, but no, he lost his wife quite early.
Yes, and actually we will, let's talk about that. It's a it's a big part of his life also. American philosopher and author considered one of the most contemporary thinkers in the field of integral and transpersonal theory. I think his college dropped out, went into a couple of college. I don't know whether he completed the degree, but he's really self-taught person. And he developed a lot of ideas, working for a few years, cleaning the dishes during the day and working on his ideas in the night. So I don't think any fancy PhD degrees from the very big colleges. So it's really the grassroots philosopher who has come through. His wife, you'd mentioned, he talks quite a lot about his wife, who was, I think, suffering from cancer, and he took a lot of time really helping her transcend and supported her in her journey. So he also has that side. And he's best known for creating integral theory. He was always his mind, and he also talked about that. He also wanted to put all the things together. It's philosophy, psychology, religion. I personally think this is also a hubris of the Western mind, that there has to be a complete one theory putting everything. It's coming from Stephen Hawking, the theory of everything. brief history of time, and like everything could be condensed and reduced to something. And he tried to do it with all such open topics. And for me, both are there. A lot of things when he tried to combine, he just tried to reduce them to something which should not be reduced. So that's why a lot of people and a lot of philosophers are really against his work. It's basically because he's reducing a lot of things. However, with every reduction comes the beauty of our minds able to understand and put the things on perspective. And he did it also wonderfully. That's the both sides of his being and his personality. He was influenced by spiritual and philosophical figures like Jean Gebser, and last session we were looking at the philosophy of Sri Aurobindo, so he's really inspired by these two very strongly, and Buddhism. So he did his work to integrate Eastern and the Western thinking with a perspective also to reduce them. Prolific writers and major works including The Spectrum of Consciousness. He became famous with this book, which was a very big hit, Sex, Ecology and Spirituality, in 1995. And of course, Hubris, The Brief History of Everything. So let's look how he tried to condense it, Brief History of Everything. So now it's going to, because it's everything he's talking about, so it's going to be a bit more knowledge and complicated in that perspective. So please stay with me on that. Evolution of Consciousness, Ken Wilber model. It's also similar to Jean Gebser, and at some point we put them together, but let's try to see him independently first. So he started also with archaic consciousness, with emerging self-awareness. There was a survival with instincts, intuition, and blending with others. For me, I'm in that forest just there, where I know everything, but I don't know anything, but I was connected with everything. It's a consciousness around 250,000 years. From archaic consciousness, we move to different levels of consciousness. First, we started with the indigenous consciousness, estimated where the world started to become enchanted. So, the dimensionality come. There were the rituals and the deep community which started working with that. And there were the groups over individuals. People started coming together. And then comes the tribal culture, which become more egocentric. There's a fight between one tribe to other tribes. First become groups and then tribes. There were the courageous, determined and powerful and impulsive and ruthless. Here we are going more, and the colors are very important in his theory, and he said because the colors, we connect with the colors. So he put these colors in that. The first is more infrared and another shade of red, and then tribal become core red. And then we move to the next two levels. But then from tribal we move to traditional. And the traditional, when with the civilization, we started becoming more civilized. So there was a timeline in his theory. We become ethno or nation-centric. We started having rules, roles, and discipline, and having a faith in a transcendent God. Around 5,000 years ago. And then, with the scientific revolution, we have become more modern. There's a rationality and science, individualism and democracy, and capitalism and materialism. So here, 5,000 years and 300 years. See, we really focus on this, but it's only 300 years. We have so much. That's what they're all talking about. Everything is there, and everything at the efficient and deficient side. And then we move to postmodern. Summer of Love. 1960s arrived. The psychedelic revolution. We just don't know what's going to happen at that point, but something is like, yeah, but we need to just cut through all these structures of traditional modernity which we have been given, all the rules and regulations. Let's connect with everything. And that's what happened. And so it's a postmodern revolution, and it's also something like everybody is equal in that. There's a pluralism, there's an equality, and all these LGBTQ rights, queer culture, women rights, ecological movement started at that point, or really took step to the next level at that point. And that's where we keep on moving with the postmodern level. However, the postmodern revolution also didn't survive very well. I think with Nixon coming in 1980s, everything just 1970s, everything just completely tossed up. And of course, there was a deficient version with the Charles Manson case and other things which led to that. However, the reason it's so important is the remnants of that revolution kept. So we're still discussing all these ideas, beliefs. I lived in San Francisco, I studied in San Francisco. If you say there's still a very strong postmodern, this culture of pluralism where everyone is equal, and they try to put that together. Where are we going and what is emerging? And then he says more about integral is coming, which is a leading edge currently. That's why it's become one of the most important topics of our current generation. We're moving more toward the systemic thinking. Systemic thinking is, again, everything is connected to everything, and through that, how we can create new systems in the world. You and I were discussing about that before. Principles of nature, how we can use the principles of nature. How we can embody multiple perspectives. And that's why the Eastern and the Western, we talk about these all perspectives are coming together and holding, we're critiquing each one of them, but we're holding them by critiquing them and trying to see the efficient side of that and see whether or not they come together. There's a culture and creativity. They focus on if you say the drummings and some rituals, how we can creative on art and the music, which are shaping our society. He said other level of integral within integral. So this is a teal, and the next level is turquoise, which is emerging a world as alive and evolving. And here we are going back to the ever-present origin, that there's an evolution which is happening. It's holistic. At some point, this word holistic has become so like abusive by now. Everything is just becoming holistic, but there's a beauty in that word holistic and cosmocentric. And where the individual and transpersonal self just merge. So for me, I talked about my meditative experience in this. For me, my individual self and in the meditation experience, I was having a transpersonal self. They intertwine. People start talking around those things and what they learn from that. And he said the next level will be post-integral, which is really the unity consciousness. Again, we in the world are same, but that level of deep experience of the unity consciousness, where we work with the wisdom, joy, and love. It's something which has been part of the saints and sages of the past. It's an aspiration. And if you say that this is a much more dimensional perspective on that, but it includes the archaic, similar in that nature. A lot of information here. I throw one more information and then take the questions here. His work has been used by Frederick Laloux in the book Reinventing Organizations, which is a very big hit. A lot of companies are working on that, working with that understanding and the theory. His work has also been used as spiral dynamics, because they also said it's not like linear process, it's also a spiral evolution there includes and transcend. So these two works are really becoming contemporary now. And Frederick Lulu with Ken Wilber, they talk about our cultures, our organization cultures on that perspective. Like red organizations are more tribal organizations, like militaries. He said military would be needing red. If we are talking about some companies which are more traditional in nature, like manufacturing companies or old business companies, they have the old structures which are part of rules, discipline. And if you're talking about the modern company, there's a lot of companies which are coming as modern, which are trying to do the right thing, where you can have discussion, which are very research based. The logic can solve the problems. Modern. And the postmodern is for me, it's more hippie type companies, which are also part of like San Francisco culture, the new tech age, which is coming. At least they are trying to put this type of culture of equality and everybody together. Everybody is equal. And then they talk about the next level should be teal organization, this first level of integral. And there's a lot of conferences also happened in, I think, a few years ago in Switzerland about teal organizations. If you hear the word teal organization and how do we go with the teal, they're using the same structure, which is more the new models of in the business are coming is holacracy and yeah, these type of completely new ways of thinking and being and how we can put the things together. In my experience, in my knowledge, the teal organizations is at its leading edge, it's still emerging in the organization level. I haven't seen a good example so far, but I have seen a lot of good tries. Most of them have failed. However, they tried. And for me, organization cannot succeed if the individual consciousness of the people has not shifted. So we are putting at the cultural level, but unless we solve that, the individual consciousness will not be able to succeed. So yeah, but which comes first? I think this individual change, systemic change, both are working together. Thoughts, comments, questions, experiences?
I like it very much. Always when it's very beautiful, but I really don't like that he put times on that. I mean, we know more and more also from archaeology, it's coming up a lot now, that the way we think about, humanity or civilization being developed is not really what we thought how it is, that it's again this linear process, right? Yeah. And I mean, things like, civic rights, environmentalism and so on, there's 3,000 years before Christ, Minoan Crete, where there was egalitarian, society that had a little bit different direction than, let's say, power, right? Yeah. So it's again the same thing. It's like, for me, it's all happening at the same time. And I like that idea of the spiral, that one is building up upon another. Yeah. But I find that just this linear, that 15,000 years ago, it was that type of consciousness, and only 50 years ago we have, or whatever, 20 years ago we became cosmocentric, and it's kind of, for me, also disrespectful of the past. Again, it's the same idea of like, we are now highly developed human comparing to those savage people from 250 years ago.
It's both. For me, he's reducing it quite a lot by putting these timestamps or putting this complete one way. I'm also with you. We have this rationality consciousness in 2,500 years ago in ancient classical ancient Greece. So there's a lot of things there, which if we go into that, and that's the problem with every brief history of time. There. And I'll come there. He in the next slides he says something which is even more controversial than this.
Is it in the nature of every model But it is reductionist.
But you don't need to put times, For me, it's just the main critique that I have towards that is that it concerns some kind of, linear thought or like it's linear progression rather than. I mean, I totally get that those levels that he talks about, or levels, or like for me, these are kind of like building blocks of consciousness that kind of are legal in the timeline. So I totally love that very much. I think he's a genius.
Yeah.
But I think the times that he put, it's a bit like I don't think that he knows a lot about, or he didn't put a lot of, effort maybe in looking back into.
Yeah, I personally think he's
and other cultures.
And I think it's both. I think time stamping is also it gives our logical mind a structure to follow, but at the same time, it doesn't work for few people. So I would say, take whatever resonates. Forget the timing. Put that structure around that. You also had a point.
No, I completely agree actually with her because I think time is not necessary. It's as she said, like blocks which are you integrate. You need to integrate them all in a development of consciousness, and they don't go linear always. They don't develop one after the other. Sometimes also you backtrace, kind of go back to one level.
And for me, this time is more about examples, so that I think the logical mind can understand. Mm-hmm. I somehow think his mind, as I understand, can take the level of complexity. It's basically trying to make it more easy for our reductionist mind to understand. But if you can go without that, it's even better.
Is this possible also to be seen as, some different positions that a single individual can also have, like different degrees of your way of observing reality in a way, like the position that you have towards reality. I mean, some of these steps, I also don't think that all humanity is going in the same direction right now, I guess. I don't know. But I think individuals can see the world in different, these different attitudes.
Thank you. And I think that's the point here. It's so his model is even more complex than that. I just, for the sake of understanding and time, I put it there. His model is actually 3-dimensional. If you put a brief history of time. So here is these are the levels of consciousness. And then he said there are the lines of consciousness. And I'll link back to your question in a few minutes. And then he said there are various capabilities in individuals. So one is again the same thing is within individual, our cognitive capability, our emotional capability, which is psychosexual capability, and there are a couple of others I've got. And he said that a spiritual one definitely, and I'm forgetting one. And he said that different people, one person could be in different level of consciousness at different capabilities. Mm. He said he gave the examples of Indian gurus. He said, as we have a very big problem of false gurus in Indian system. I'll just put it in the camera. We have a problem of false gurus. So he said what is there is they might be very evolved at the spiritual level, but they might not be very evolved here or here.
Interesting.
So different people can go through different processes. Yeah. So that's the answer to your question. There are lines of consciousness, and we need to work, and of course if we can just balance it, the more imbalance can create more imbalance even in the personality.
Would it also correlate with the different levels of intelligence in modern psychology?
Say again, say more.
That also this graph can also correlate with the different levels of intelligence in modern psychology.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's where we can go into different states. There's also a third dimension, and how do we put it there is more about spiritual experiences. More we go into experiences part of it, and I'm remembering it's more about I think one is nature, then deity with God, other is formless and non-dual. I think it's called causal, subtle, physical, I think, yeah. And he said that, yeah, we can have the experiences, and those experiences can give us different levels of consciousness. So, in short, what he's talking about is 3: waking up, no, sorry, he talk about cleaning up, waking up, and growing up.
Isn't it waking up first? I mean, I heard it, I'm not sure if it's from him, but I've heard it the other way around.
It's the other way around, that's what I was thinking. I have to check. Yeah, you're right. Waking up, cleaning up, and growing up. You're right. Sorry, in Indian system we have otherwise.
First you clean, then growing up.
Yeah, that's why we have this purification first, and then the waking up happen. Our model is in Sanskrit is Shuddhi, Mukti, Shuddhi, Mukti, Bhukti, which is similar. Waking up, cleaning up, and growing up. And he's saying that, yeah, we wake up, and he said Indian models or Eastern models are mainly focusing on waking up, but they don't focus on cleaning, like all the work on all the shadow work which we have to do, and then also growing in different dimensions which we need to grow up.
So I just want to talk about the top, the unity consciousness. I mean, here it says wisdom, love, and joy, which I call love and light, sort of. What about equanimity? I mean, why is he? It's again, this kind of cutting off a certain consciousness that we consider as, because for me, unity consciousness is everything is included.
And what is equanimity for you?
For me, it's the inclusion. Unity for me is everything is included. Everything is, if there's a primal origin or primal source, it has been all created by the source in a way.
Yeah.
So for me, it also creates a kind of a certain concept of where we are going towards in like, for example, in healing. There's all like we are going towards the perfect, blissful state, which unity consciousness is. Yeah. Which I think it's again a bit.
That's a very big critique he has got from many people, because he's also creating levels of spiritual experience, because the moment he put it is like a non-dual is better than dual experience.
Yeah.
And then it can go even more deeper than that. Some non-dualist religions are then potentially better than the dualistic religions. So there's a hierarchy which is being created in his systems, and that's the major critique of it. That I think my mentor critiqued him mainly on that this hierarchy create a separation again. His response to that, which I think we also need to take into consideration, is coming from a mental perspective there. His response to that is that he said there are 2 types of hierarchies. One is domination hierarchies and other are growth hierarchies. And he said domination hierarchy is more about with the intention that one is better than other, and growth hierarchies is we want to become a better person than we were. And I personally think there is some wisdom in what he's also saying.
So what is it, becoming to a better person?
Becoming a better person than we were. So we are growth aspiring towards becoming better.
And what is better?
And that's what he said. These levels are better. And that's what the point is.
And so that's, I mean, for him it's the growth curve, and the other there's a domination curve.
Yes, he
Which
said.
I don't see a difference to be honest here.
He said there are two levels of thinking. I'll cover it. This is the first type tier thinking, and this is the second tier thinking. And he said this is the second tier thinking is better than the first tier thinking. But in the first tier thinking, till the level of including postmodern, which is there, it's not the leading edge. We need to really work on putting the what we call as looking into what is the paradoxes across the levels and try to resolve them within ourselves. For example, he gave this example of, and that's a very controversial example, but I'll still put it in equality. He said, equal participation is a modern thought, where everybody should get equal opportunities is a modern thought. Everybody should get equal opportunities to participate. Equality is a postmodern thought, which is linked to the result of what people are getting. And how do we balance that? Sometimes companies can offer equal participation, but still it's not equality around that. So those are the discussions and debates we need to have and transcend that. And I understand you, Kasha, and he's a very well and a lot of let's say it's a very masculine model what he's going towards, and also something like Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris. These are the talks he's working with, and that's the biggest critique of his work.
And it's very difficult for me, to separate, because you say, in order to kind of to make it more understandable for kind of a general public and so on. I think it's very difficult to distinguish for me between a human being who's, let's say, Ken Wilber is, and he's sort of, what his motivation is in a specific structure. Yeah. Why he's, that's why for me it's just difficult to kind of say, okay, this is like the theory, this is like rational, this is like, separate from actually a human being that is a human being who has a certain agenda, behind conscious, unconscious, whatever.
That's the paradoxes we are living in.
Yeah.
And at some point, Aristotle said women are inferior than men because they have lesser tree. Goethe has put some of the very racist statements in his work. So there are people around that, which we have done. And then some people say, look into teaching, not as a teacher. Some person see people, exactly what you said, I cannot separate that. And both are okay. That's what I'm saying. You have one perspective of it and you're okay with that. But there are different perspectives which are also okay with that. And that's why I didn't work with Ken Wilber for a very long time, because I rejected him for a very, very long time. Especially he had a debate with my mentor, and I'm very close to my mentor there. But then I took a leap of faith. I'll read him. And when I started reading him, I find the beauty in his work. And I see where he's coming from. I see his deficiencies. But I think he's really onto something also. And especially when we are going from a deficient mental world to integral, we need some different mental layers to explain. And that's my own personal journey around that. I need not to take it, and that might be even wrong. And all options are equally valid. But when we are talking about integral theory of consciousness, for me, his work we cannot avoid. And let me go and how he linked back to the Jean Gebser. He put archaic as archaic, magical is indigenous and tribal. Mythical is traditional. Mental is modern, and integral is for. And that's how he put it. He again put a work with the first tier thinking and the second tier thinking. That's also very heavily challenged, critiqued. Because he really created a hierarchy here, and that's my biggest problem with his model, is some people, if you go into those circles, they say, oh, you're talking with the first tier hierarchy, a first tier thinking. This is not a second tier thinking. It become a spiritual arrogance or knowledge arrogance around that. Oh, you are very much into the mythical layer. So these become new terminologies which people use. So it's also individual how we work with those structures and models. And personally, I also find I find some ways to put it, because I did corporate work. With one corporations, the corporation was at the traditional level, and I was training them on the postmodern thought process. It completely fell flat. Yeah. And I realized the people are not ready, organization not, the culture is not ready, the values are not ready, the languages are not ready, but it was not even ready. They don't need it. It's a different environment they were operating in. There. And something what they are doing is needed. Same thing in military. Probably we need rules there. So that's why if you can say the red is red and red has its own way of being, they're in a particular structure, particular setup. And if you can take the efficient version of red in that, it's fine. So not everything needs to go up. But going up is also a choice, if you want. Thought?
Processing.
Yeah.
Can I ask you your opinion about this cleaning up, let's say, part that I see there? I mean, I've always been very, fascinated by psychology, if you want, or this side. But what I also like of the Eastern idea is really that you don't have to work on that. You can really,
Transcend that.
Yes, and I think it's a good point, honestly, because I think it's a power that you don't have to go back on all your history to be happy, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. And also because the Western point of view, you don't really clean up.
Yeah.
Never, right? Completely. So
And
in a
sometimes
way,
you get lost in the cleaning up, you never
Right.
wake up.
so I'm not sure this is a necessary step, right?
What is cleaning up?
Yes, that's what I mean.
Shadow
I don't know,
work,
I see
basically.
it.
Yeah, but what is shadow work? It's integrating. It's integrating into.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, cleaning up, it's like I'm taking rubbish out,
Exactly.
and for me, that's not the shadow work. It's an integration of shadow into the consciousness, where it takes the place among my good parts.
Yeah. But having said that, this integration of the shadows in it, in some Indian traditions we don't have that concept. The guru come into the structure, give you meditation, give you an experience, and work on you at the energetic level, at least in that system, where at that energetic level where everything gets dissolved. And then you don't need to participate in it, because it's no longer there. It's a different mind, it's a different way of being in it. I personally think there's also beauty in it. And there's a huge shadow with not integrating the shadow work of it. Sometimes linked to the spiritual bypass. And I've seen more people in the Indian systems who are spiritually arrogant, that I know better than you, just because I had that experience. I personally think they go, and I think that's why there's a beauty for me, this beauty. They really develop in this level, in this line, but they don't develop in other lines. How many of them are in jail, honestly?
Yeah, but that's crazy, right?
It's crazy.
I mean, it breaks my heart, honestly. to see a lot of, and it also happens now in the psychedelic culture. I mean, this spiritual kind of revelations, that's transcending, going into the transcendental realms. It's a really fantastic place to go into grandiosity and kind of completely lose yourself into like I'm the god, and it's where's the ground?
Where's the ground? And the ground.
Shamanic world as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You hear it all the time now.
Yeah.
The more people go into kind of shamanic or psychedelic work without doing the shadow work.
Yes. And for me, that's the beauty of Ken Wilber and Jean Gebser, what they're bringing. They're bringing that, they're not saying it's primitive, this mythical layer. They say, go to the mythical layer. Go to that magical layer. Allow yourself, but also integrate them back. Go towards the integral. And the shadow work is part of, and Kasha used the word integration. For me, that's also part of integral. We allow ourselves to go into those realms, but come back and integrate. And my perspective is that's why I completely in Eastern traditions, I had in the beginning I completely said no, this is not for me for a very long time. It seemed like Ken Wilber on the other direction. Now I'm more open to those, because then I know my limits. I know I can take the efficient version of it and I can say these are the deficient versions, and if in those people, those communities, I have a voice not to participate in that, then I'm fine. I would like to take my own version of their efficient version. But there's a beauty in it. I personally think they are also right, in my personal experience. Only cleaning up will not do it. It has to be something more change at the body level which is required.
I find criticizing all those theories very, very important. For me again, I really love his work, and with the beauty of a work like that is also people kind of follow it sometimes and take it as a it's like a guru
blindly.
So that's why for the sake of like just showing different perspectives. I just find it very important to criticize or like to really judge sometimes, and just to kind of trigger people a bit into thinking, is it really?
Yeah. No, I think these. So honestly, for me, it was.
Is it mine?
Yeah. For me, it took a very long time to work on Ken Wilber, to accept Ken Wilber, and that's exactly the same thing. How can I get into the efficient side of it, not going into deficient versions of him, and at the same time have my own choice. But I think, and I believe, and based on my readings of him, he is onto something also. He's the same Aristotle and Goethe of the world, people of their own time. And we don't need to blindly follow them. And actually, some of my friends who interviewed them, but then when they interview them, they also write a blog criticizing him. Because we need that balance. Doesn't want to move. I think this is also very important. I know in the time, but I'll be fast. 4 quadrants model. So, and that's another big beauty of the work which he has put. He took a lot from Aristotle in it, but he make it again relevant and easily understandable to the current mind. He divides this into 2 axes. It's a quadrant, there is a matrix, interior and exterior. And now this is the from a Western side, it's a huge step where you put one part completely on the interior. What is inside me, which is highly subjective. And the other axis he put is individual and collective. What individual has to do, what collective has to do. So now let's say first each one of them. Interior individual. This is the I, my subjective experience, this is my self-experience, my experience. That's where all these Indian guru models, this Eastern consciousness has really thrived and flourished. The world is not only outside, the world is inside. By inside we can change everything outside. Focus on in. There's another perspective of individual exterior. These theories of brain, neuroscience, and biochemistry, we are coming how the signals move in our body and how do we participate with the world. There's a lot of resonance in between them. Starting point is, for me, is different. The Western mind is on the exterior side, the Eastern mind is on the interior side, but it's come together the same mindset. We will be having sessions on meditator's brain where we look into both together. The third is collective. Collective is we, which is intersubjectivity. And here he's saying, what is the interior of a collective? If you go to an organization which is a collective, what is an interior of it? Shared values, trust, culture, ethics. There is a layer of that which is present in those companies. And the same as a society. The Swiss society is different than Indian society. The cultural ethos, value systems are different. And that's the layer. And somebody who worked on his work, he put a very, very, very good example. When we go to a country, for example, we don't live there, but when we go for a vacation, we try to see how the trams work, how things work, how the waiters, what are the tipping system around how people dress. But in few weeks, that's all we can get. But there's an underlying layer of culture, ethics, value we can only get when we live in the country and we participate in it. And that layer is interior collective. And the other layer is exterior collective. What is the economic system? What are the technology? What are the regulations? And what are the systemic projects we are going to do to change the world? And this model, so a lot of people have started doing a lot of work on this, which means they start putting thinkers in each category. They start doing, okay, I'm working on this, I'm working on that. But every model is reductionist and also gives something around that. So position what we are doing. So he called this entire thing as AQA, all quadrants, all levels. So these are A, all quadrants. The first was all levels. I didn't go into the concept of lines in it, levels and the lines. And that's his brief history of everything. In few slides. So we had a lot of discussions around that. Let me, because on the time, let me go to what is integral consciousness, because whether we are talking about Gebser, Ken Wilber, Sri Aurobindo, I think one thing is similar, is there's a new level of consciousness we need to participate. In that sense, we can't solve the problems with the same level of consciousness that created it. We need to go into different levels of consciousness. Integral consciousness. So Jean Gebser describes integral consciousness, the culmination of human development, where time becomes time-free. So he's having this perspective. There's a freedom. For him, this freedom is very important. And we experience reality in a transparent whole manner. he explained that integral consciousness is not merely a new structure, but a mutation and transformation that incorporates the earlier structures like archaic, magical, mythical, and mental without being bound to them.